Now, the mayors of the West Midlands and Greater Manchester today came up with 3 options to replace the cancelled HS2 between Birmingham and Manchester. They are working with private companies, including construction firms and accountants, to come up with the plans.
Well, it comes on the day MPs published a scathing report on HS2, which claims the government has no idea of how the project will function now that public funding of the northern leg to Manchester has been cancelled. We have correspondents live in Birmingham and Westminster. First to Mark Goff at HS2 Curzon Street. And Mark, talk us through the 3 options offered by the 2 mayors.
Yeah, so what are we talking about here? Either a baby HS2, son of HS2 or daughter of HS2? Well, none of those things, because there's not going to be any HS about it at all. They're not going to be high speed. So what plans have the 2 mayors come up with today? Well, 1, upgrade the existing West Coast line. 2, bypass the existing West Coast line with a bit of upgrade and some new track. Or 3, build a completely new and separate line alongside the West Coast line between Birmingham and Manchester. Of course, the big question and the big criticism, which we'll hear a bit more about in a moment from Westminster about HS2, is it didn't provide value for money. Andy Street, the mayor, reckons these plans may well just do that.
The balance of cost and benefit for none of the pieces has yet been worked out. That's the next stage. But where all of the experts are is there is a sweet spot here where it can be done for considerably less than the cost of HS2. We can consider the blend of public finance and private finance, and we will get, let's call it, a proportion of the benefit of the original HS2 case. And it's finding that sweet spot is really the next piece of work.
Well, helping them find that sweet spot are a couple of big firms. Arup, a construction firm, Ernst & Young, the accountants. They're helping draw up the kind of business plan for this, free of charge. And the 2 mayors have also spoken to the government just last week about the idea, and the government hasn't necessarily ruled out that they'll stump up some cash too alongside the private cash. I asked both the mayors today, out of 10, how optimistic they were that this will go ahead.
I'll give you a number, because politicians always give this number, then people all judge it in the same way. It's about 7.5, 8 out of 10. But perhaps the more important question, Mark, is I'm very, very much more optimistic than I was when this decision was taken in Manchester. I genuinely think in a few short months we've come a very long way.
I might even go a little nudge higher than Andy. I don't know. I would even go 8 or 9. Why? Because when you just look at it and you consider how critical this area is in terms of connectivity for the country, most people, in my view, will look at it, and if they see a reasonable way of fixing it that the country can afford, will say, OK, we should do that.
Will the new line, if it ever happens, go along the existing cancelled HS2 line? Not decided. And what will happen to the land which has already been bought up for HS2, which has been cancelled? Not decided.
Interesting developments and, of course, questions still to be answered. But for now, Mark, thank you very much. Let's cross live to Alison at Westminster. Alison, tell us more about this critical MP's report on the existing plans for HS2.
Well, exactly. Here it is. And you mentioned unanswered questions. That's what this report says, lingering from the government in connection with the existing plans. Yes, Rishi Sunak biffed the second part from Birmingham up to Manchester, but it's coming up to £67 billion for the existing route from Birmingham to London. That stays in place. The department itself says it's not good value for money. So why are they still going ahead with that section? The committee chair has a view on that.
They managed to pull the figures together to show that basically if they don't do phase 1, they'll have to spend £11 billion unpicking phase 1. So on that basis, it's just about the right side, but it's really very marginal. And when you think what the value for money was really, the whole project, getting people at a reasonable speed, better capacity on the rail lines, and now we're seeing those high-speed trains will go onto the old tracks at a slower pace and be on the same train lines as the existing trains. So we're not going to see the capacity or the the speed beyond Birmingham. So, you know, it's not really value for money.
Over the years, I've sat here report after report criticising the plans as they were, claiming about poor governance, poor oversight. So not a surprise that a big section's been cancelled from public funding. And one of those who said, didn't exactly say I told you so, is Midlands campaigner Joe Rukin.
We're now looking at getting half the railway, you know, only London to Birmingham, not to Manchester, not to Leeds, for twice the cost. This is absolutely ridiculous that HS2 has been allowed to get away with this all this time. It's only ever existed as a gravy train for the construction industry.
Well, we spoke to the Department for Transport about this critical report. They say we disagree with the committee's assessment. Our plans for Euston, for example, are already receiving extensive support from the private sector, and the government saying we will continue to deliver HS2 at the lowest reasonable cost in a way that prioritises value for the taxpayer. So who's right? They disagree, but at least that section 1 will still be built.